Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Shoutbox, the show where an Englishman rants about controversial gaming topics from this week's news, presented with a nice cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit. Now today's topic is both sensitive, but it's also about as important as it comes, but it should give you guys an idea of what to expect from the show. Video game violence is something that affects all gamers, not because at any moment we could play a violent game and be swept away with an urge to beat our neighbour half to death, but because media attention is making us all look bad. Recently, politicians in the land of the free have pulled their chubby white fingers out of their pockets and pointed to video games as the root of all evil. This, for me, raises two important questions. One, why blame video games? Why us? Why not poor parenting, or inadequate education, or mental health support, the media, guns, TV, films? Why make us the scapegoat? And question number two, is there any credibility to this claim? Well, let's start with blame. Ralph Nadir, old Ralphie as we like to call him, some white middle-aged washed up tosser for those that don't know him, went right ahead last week and called video games electronic child molesters. But that was a metaphor. He didn't really mean games abuse children physically in a way, say, a Catholic priest would. What he means is, well, he means something like games are bad because they molest children somehow. My point is this kind of renegade blogging, this say any old shit to cause a panic, does sadly represent what in technical sociological terms is called a folk devil. This is where the media and uppity impressionable types with too much free time and a need to feel superior jump on a bandwagon of hate to blame a minority for recent events. Now there is a big difference between genuine parental concern and ignorant fearmongers on a power trip. Some of these ignorant fucks work at the National Rifle Association, who's sensing a shitstorm recently also pulled their chubby white fingers out of their pockets and blame video games for violent crime. Now what you really have to appreciate here is that the NRA are a non-profit gun association and as such have no reason to be talking about video games. Unless of course it's the violent games they make, those are okay, don't worry. Understandably, their organisation has also come under fire recently, and instead of just defending a man's right to own a gun, they tried desperately to serve the American public the video game scapegoat, which is insulting because one, I've never heard of a video game that could be used to murder somebody, and two, the NRA are not psychologists, they don't have qualifications to make these judgments, they don't have the research, and quite frankly, if anyone made a similar claim towards their organisation, I'd expect a fucking lawsuit. And then in the most ironic turn of events, they released a statement explaining that law-abiding gun owners shouldn't be blamed for the acts of criminals and madmen. And I agree, in England we don't have that many guns and so much of our violent crime revolves around knives. But we don't condemn supermarkets for selling them, we look towards social issues. But in the same sense, Mr. NRA, law-abiding game users shouldn't be blamed for the acts of criminals and madmen either, you hypocritical sacks of shit. So yes, Mr. Obama Man American Superhero has released some money into the research of violent media, which is good. If violent media does cause violent crime, we should know, but it was of course a courtesy gesture. You see, psychologists, being busy little bees, they have studied the effects of violence in our media repeatedly. And the conclusion? Well, we just don't know. A brief overview, and mind, I'm not a psychologist, I live with a psychologist, my fiance minds, I'm not nursed by one, is that while some research suggests that violent games can cause desensitization and raise aggression, there is no conclusive evidence to suggest that violent games alone can lead to violent crime. The problem is that children know the difference between fantasy violence, which occurs in a lot of mediums such as games, TV, films, comics, books, plays, paintings, sculptures, music, and the Bible, and real-life violence. And it is the parents' job to properly educate their children on what is socially acceptable behaviour and what is not. This is currently the peer-tested, prevailing opinion of most psychologists, and feel free to prove me wrong. I am a parent, it is important for me too, but it's one hell of a jump to say that video games will take a well-adjusted child and turn them into a violent criminal. The research just isn't there in favour of video game violence causing violent crime. Sorry. However, let's discuss something that's interesting to me. The US homicide rate per capita is 4.5 per 100,000 in 2012. Now, the UK, as an equally corrupt nation of gamers playing Condemned 2: Return of the Gore, only has a 1.2 per 100,000. And even Japan, capital of the most disturbing anime segments ever conceived, and just as much violent media as you can handle, has a 0.4 per 100,000 And it gets better. In 1993, Doom was released, one of the first examples of horrifically violent gaming media, and since then, murders in the US have halved from 9.0. Halved. Let that sink in. In Florida, since the release of Doom, violent crime has also halved. Now, this is what we call correlation, not causation. I don't think there's a link here, but that's the point. I think if there's anything to take from this as a gamer, you probably, like me, feel a little threatened by bald politicians calling us out, and I think it's wrong. I think even if violent games are a bad influence, we should do the research first, find out to what extent violent media contributes to violent crime, and if it's higher than social factors, then let's do something about it. But until then, let's not piss all over a massive contributor to the world economy, a great employer, and a technological innovator. Anyway, that's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed the video, expect more, and I'll see you next time.